Steam Next Fest, an event held on Steam only 3 times a year that features hundreds of demos. Almost any unreleased game is eligible to participate, but a game can only participate once, unless it's been at least a year since it last participated, and it hasn't already participated twice. Actually, I have no clue if any of that's right. Steam has said a lot of conflicting things. But anyway, my game Wormslayer was eligible. I've released a demo for a Steam event before, but I really want to participate in Next Fest for no particular reason. Also, the demo I made is still up, and if you stick around, I'll tell you how to get it. Alright, I've got 30 days to get as much work done as possible. I'm just coming off a long break, so I'm feeling extremely motivated to start right now. First, I redid some art. Old worm sprites, new worm sprites. These switches in the settings menu are both unclear and inaccessible to people with certain kinds of color blindness, so I turned them into X's and checks. The outlines on these spikes look a lot like hearts, so I changed those too. And for some reason I thought it would look cool if the chests were transparent, so those got redone too. Okay, so you see this rock over here? That's supposed to tell you that you can switch your items with the number keys. It did not do that well at all. Everyone just thought it was a clue to some puzzle. So now it gets taught with these button prompts. It's a bit cluttered, but it's an improvement. I also decided to show you how to use your class ability there too, which was a really great way to overload the player with information, but I couldn't think of a better idea at the time, so it's staying like that for now. Oh, and guess what I also did with those control prompts? Dropping items was one of the first things I added to the game, but nobody knew that it existed or how to do it. So I made a prompt showing how when you find a new item but have no space for it. You can't drop your main weapons, but there's no feedback for why, so I added a pop-up for when you try to drop them. I've always been told these rocks and graves are hard to see, which is kind of bad since they have collision, so I gave them a little shout out so they stand out. It's not perfect, but it's better. I made health potions show the amount of health you gain back. I gave the walls textures, and I ended up using a fairly interesting system instead of a basic tile set. Based on which sides don't have attaching walls, it will randomly place some of these textures. I put a little M in the corner of the minimap to explain to people which button to press to put the minimap into full screen mode. That was a hard sentence to say. A while ago I tried to add a trail behind the player, but it didn't look so good, so I gave up. This time I was actually able to get something that looked pretty good. Then I made the rocks and graves breakable because breaking stuff is fun, but the actual code for it sucked. I probably could have added this feature in around 2 hours if I'd used some hacky solutions or dumb workarounds, but instead I decided to overhaul a little bit of the old code to make it integrate better, and that fucking broke everything. It took so many hours to fix all the bugs because I kept trying to overhaul things along the way. At a certain point I just had to accept it or I'd never be done. Like collision boxes are handled really weirdly. There's one list that stores colliders that only affect the player, and there's a list of colliders that affect the player and everything else. And the former one was only meant to store these walls. But when I added doors, I didn't want items, projectiles, etc. passing through them, so I reused that list. But there came a problem when the doors had to be opened, so I would mark down how many wall colliders there were, then add the door colliders to the end. And every frame it would remove colliders from the end of the list until it reached the start of the wall colliders. And then it would add the door colliders back if the doors weren't open. Because for some fucking reason, past me thought, ah yes, this is a great workaround, and just left it like that. And then the rocks and graves eventually got tacked onto that. And I can't even be bothered to touch that after all I've been through. I always used to code with absolutely no redundancy, so I would just make special cases constantly for everything. And if I wanted to reuse the code for one of those cases, it would just get tacked on at the end with no concern for anything long term. And around the time I was doing this, I had an awakening where I realized that that way of programming sucks. I don't have a clue how I didn't realize sooner. Anyway, so I was just fixing the stupid things I'd done left and right. And all of that just to make rocks break. Okay, it's been a week. I should start working on some new content for the demo. One thing I think the game is currently missing is the ability to create different builds. So here we have some statues that you can break to receive different buffs. I'll just arrange them randomly like so, and once you pick 2, the rest will be destroyed. So far I've made 14 of the buffs, but I think I'm going to take a break from that and work on the worms. Right now the worms don't have a lot of variety, so first we're going to add some new segments. The first 2 are variations on the shooting segment. This one alternates between shooting orthogonally and diagonally, and this one shoots in a spiral pattern. Then I made a segment that shoots homing spikes, and fun fact, it's not supposed to do that, and then a segment that shoots these slow-moving orbs. Now this is the splitter segment. Unlike the previous segments, it doesn't shoot anything. Instead, when the worm it belongs to dies, a new smaller worm will hatch from it. This is the oozer segment. You'll never guess what it creates behind it. Alright, now this one just straight up has an axe. Finally, this segment shoots lightning, and this one shoots mines. Also, as a sort of progression system, some of the new segments only appear on floor 2 or 3. And now I'll just add these new segments to the journal and there. I still have a couple more things I want to work on with the worms, but let's move on for now. The invisibility potion is useless, so I replaced it with the rage potion, which is actually useful. It makes you do extra damage for a short period of time. Then I finished the last 8 statues and set everything up to be fully functional. There are 4 different types of statues: stat boosts, stat boosts with drawbacks, class ability switch outs, and weapon upgrades. I'm only going to show you the weapon upgrades though, because they're the most visually interesting. There's the stun upgrade for the bow. It makes the arrows the bow shoots briefly stun worms. The heavy upgrade for the hammer. It makes spikes erupt from the ground when the hammer is slammed down. And finally the long sword, which can be turned into the longer sword. At some point I really want to add a longest sword that's just comically large. Anyway, I redid the art for the worm projectiles to make them easier to see. Then I wanted to work on some new worm types to fix the worm's attack patterns being too easy to memorize. I don't think I really succeeded, but I ended up adding two. First, the dash worm, which speeds up and slows down on a sine wave, and then the dull worm, which is too dull to pierce through the ground and walls. I would have added more, but I was out of ideas and motivation, and Next Fest was starting in 6 days, so that'll have to wait until later. Before I began wrapping things up for the event, I added a new game mode, which isn't in the demo. Challenge mode. It isn't very complicated. You just start on floor 3. The hard part is that your weapons aren't leveled up and you don't have any statue buffs. Instead of having a button or something, I reused a system from a secret mode I'd added before, floor 0. I'm not going to spoil floor 0 because it's in the demo, but it could be accessed by scrolling down on the floor 1 transition screen. So I just reused that system with the C key. Finally, I'm ready to finish up, so I add some new sections to the journal, including some lore for the playable characters, made it so you could quick access the journal by pressing J, fixed this bug, buffed some weak items, added some new notes expanding on some of the lore introduced for the characters, and finally released the demo. It didn't get much of a response, but I'd really like to thank the people who let me know they played it and the people who streamed it. It really means a lot to me. And I can definitely confirm that Next Fest is incredible for visibility. Like, jeez. Anyways, thanks for watching. If you want to try the demo, it's still up, so you can either go to the first link in the description or search Wormslayer into Steam. If you do try it out, let me know what you think of it. I really want to hear. I also have a Discord server where you can easily become a playtester if you really want access to the full game. That'll also be in the description. Wishlist Wormslayer on Steam. Also subscribe. I'm gonna stop selling out now so I can still retain some of my dignity. Bye!